Imagine it's like 50,000 BC, sun goes down, and there's no Netflix, there are no glowing screens anywhere, and you have absolutely zero existential dread about your email inbox.
Sounds pretty nice, honestly.
Right. But there's only you, your ancestors, a campfire, and this thick, choking smoke blowing directly into your face.
Which is basically the universal camping experience, just, without the high-tech REI tents. You're just sitting in the dirt, freezing, trying to stay close to the heat without singeing your eyebrows off.
Yeah, exactly. And somewhere, at some point, one of your ancestors looked at that smoke curling into their eyes, took a deep breath, felt something shift in their brain, and thought, wait, what if I did that on purpose?
It's a huge cognitive leap.
It really is. So today we're taking a deep dive into the evolutionary and cultural origins of smoking, when ancient humans actually started smoking.
And our mission for you today is to completely reframe how you look at a simple campfire.
Yes, completely. We are totally bypassing the guy outside your office taking a quick cigarette break. We're going way, way back to the very first time a human being intentionally inhaled burning matter.
Because when we casually talk about smoking today, it's almost impossible not to immediately picture modern agriculture or, massive colonial trade routes or those stark public health warnings.
Right, the Surgeon General warnings.
Exactly. But if we strip all of that away, we're left with a story about fundamental human biology. We're looking at early medicine and how the physical desire to inhale smoke is likely hardwired into our species.
Which is crazy to think about.
It is. It's this behavioral loop that predates civilization, farming, and even written language entirely.
So whether you're deeply curious about ancient history or fascinated by human biology or, you just love a good paradigm-shifting story, get ready. Because before we can understand how humans started smoking intentionally, we have to look at how we encountered smoke in the first place.
Which was by absolute sheer accident.
Total accident. Because to get smoke, you need fire. And the oldest confirmed evidence we have of controlled fire doesn't even come from modern humans.
No, it doesn't. It goes back roughly 1 million years. Archaeologists uncovered this at a site called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa.
1 million years.
Yeah, and we aren't talking about a lightning strike that caught a dry bush on fire, right? They found burnt plant ash and charred bone deep inside the cave structure in this very specific geological layer.
So they were keeping it going.
Exactly. That tells us it was a sustained, contained fire used deliberately for warmth and cooking. And 1 million years ago, Homo sapiens were not in the picture. This was Homo erectus, our much older evolutionary cousin.
A smaller brain, heavier brow, literally just trying to survive the night in a cave. And for hundreds of thousands of years, these ancestors just huddled around these indoor fires. They cook, they stayed warm, and they breathed smoke every single day.
Yeah.
Mac's video framed this beautifully as the original, unavoidable, unfiltered air quality crisis.
They definitely didn't have a HEPA filter.
No air purifiers in the Pleistocene. Breathing heavy, dense wood smoke was just an inescapable fact of existence.
And the chemistry of that inescapable smoke is really where this story begins. Because when you throw a branch or like a handful of leaves onto a fire, you're not just producing carbon dioxide and water vapor. You're initiating this incredibly complex chemical reaction.
Right.
Depending on exactly what organic matter goes into the flames, you're releasing a massive cocktail of compounds into the air.
And if you're a prehistoric human living in a dense forested environment, you're completely surrounded by plants that contain serious psychoactive chemicals. We were talking about alkaloids, which are these nitrogen-based compounds plants originally evolved to defend themselves against insects. We're talking about terpenes, the aromatic oils that give plants their distinct smells. Prehistoric humans were throwing wild cannabis, ancient Nicotiana species, and various entheogens right into the fire.
And just to clarify for everyone, an entheogen is essentially any plant substance that alters your perception and is typically used to generate a deeply spiritual or divine experience.
Right, but they were burning these potent plants just to keep the cave warm. Okay, let's unpack this because it is mind-blowing. It's basically the first accidental hotbox.
It literally is. They were essentially hotboxing their own living room without realizing it. But here's the biological miracle. When those compounds entered their lungs and hit their bloodstreams, their brains were entirely ready to receive them.
Oh, because of the receptors.
Yes. The human body features something called the endocannabinoid system. It's a really complex cell signaling system that plays a huge role in regulating sleep, mood, memory, appetite, all of that.
So they were already there.
Exactly. The receptors for these chemicals didn't evolve because humans started smoking cannabis. Those receptors evolved millions of years earlier to maintain biological homeostasis, keeping the body's internal environment stable.
Okay, so our brains already had the exact physiological locks waiting for the botanical keys. So when that first accidental hit of psychoactive smoke drifted over the campfire, the brain wasn't fighting off a foreign invader. The brain essentially recognized the molecular structure and said, "Oh, hello, I've been waiting for you."
That's a great way to put it. And that recognition sets the stage for a massive cognitive leap. I mean, picture a tired hunter sitting downwind of a fire fueled by wild hemp, and suddenly he feels his muscle pain dissolve and his anxiety drop.
And they had absolutely no idea why they suddenly had a great evening.
Right. But that pleasant accident gets repeated over thousands of generations. What's fascinating here is it wasn't a grand scientific plan, it was just humans recognizing cause and effect until an ancestor finally made the conscious decision to recreate that specific altered state on purpose.
But bridging the gap from I accidentally inhale the smoke and feel weirdly great to actively, intentionally setting a specific plant on fire to inhale it. I mean, that requires intense motivation.
It's a huge risk.
Exactly. Trial and error with burning strange plants could literally kill you. You could inhale something highly toxic and die right there in the cave.
Yeah.
Why would early humans actively seek this out and take that risk?
So to understand that drive, we can look at a framework developed in the 1980s by Ronald Siegel. He was a psychopharmacologist at UCLA, and he proposed something called the intoxication hypothesis.
Okay.
Siegel argued that the pursuit of an altered state of consciousness isn't just some cultural quirk or like a modern recreational hobby. He categorized it as a biological, evolutionary fourth drive.
A fourth drive, meaning it sits right alongside the primal urges for hunger, thirst, and sex.
Yes. And the most compelling evidence for this is that we see it all across the animal kingdom. It is not exclusively human at all. Elephants, for example, will deliberately seek out and consume fermented marula fruit specifically because the alcohol alters their state.
Oh man, Mac pointed out a detail in his video here that is permanently burned into my memory. The Siberian reindeer.
Oh, the reindeer. Yes.
It's so wild. They apparently actively seek out and eat Amanita muscaria, those iconic red and white psychoactive mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Like the Mario mushrooms.
Yeah.
But because those mushrooms are highly toxic in their raw form, the reindeer's digestive system actually acts as a biological filter. The liver processes the heavy toxins, but the psychoactive compounds pass through into their urine completely intact.
Which leads to...
So other reindeer will literally follow them and drink their urine just to get high. It is pure drug recycling.
It is nature operating at maximum ruthless efficiency. But, it perfectly illustrates Siegel's point. The drive to alter consciousness is deep, it's ancient, and it crosses species barriers.
I have to push back a little bit here, though. Calling it a primary biological drive alongside hunger and thirst feels like a massive leap. Is this truly an evolutionary drive? Or is it just early humans stumbling into substance addiction before they even figured out how to make pottery? I mean, hunger keeps you alive. Seeking out a high could get a hunter killed by a predator.
Well, that's a highly logical challenge. But think about how evolution and natural selection actually work. If the pursuit of altered states was purely a destructive, careless habit that got hunters killed and weakened the tribe, the elders would have stomped it out.
Right.
Evolution would have selected against it entirely. But when we look at the anthropological record across virtually every human culture ever documented, we see them preserving this behavior. They meticulously learned through that high-stakes trial and error which plants killed you and which ones expanded your perception. And they passed that lived knowledge down mouth to ear around the fire.
I guess you're right. The fact that they worked so hard to preserve the knowledge means it had to offer a massive advantage. If it was just a destructive habit, it wouldn't have survived as a universal cultural practice. It had to be doing something positive for their survival or their social structure.
Exactly. It fundamentally changed their minds, and they valued that change enough to risk their lives mapping out the local botany.
Okay, so we have this powerful biological theory of the fourth drive. But a theory from the 1980s is just a theory. If this drive to inhale smoke is truly as old as our ancient ancestors, we should see actual physical proof of it in ancient campsites, right? When does intentional smoking actually show up in the hard archaeological dirt?
We actually have some staggering recent discoveries that completely rewrite the timeline. In 2019, researchers were excavating a site in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah.
Okay.
And they uncovered a hearth a traditional cooking and heating fire pit that dates back roughly 12,000 years. Inside the compacted ash of this hearth, they found the seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, which is a wild tobacco species native to North America.
And the crucial part here is how they were found. Because these were not just a few random seeds that accidentally blew into the fire on a windy Tuesday in the Pleistocene epoch.
No, not at all.
Archaeologists analyzed the soil composition and the context of the site. The seeds were highly concentrated and packed into the hearth in a way that proves deliberate, intentional placement by human hands 12,000 years ago. That predates any known pottery or pipe artifacts in the region by thousands of years.
It completely shatters our previous assumptions. It means that long before humans settled down to domesticate plants for agriculture, long before they built permanent villages, they were already interacting with psychoactive smoke.
Wow.
And if we look across the globe to Central Asia, specifically the Pamir Mountains around 500 BC, we see this ancient practice evolving into highly sophisticated rituals. Excavators at a burial site found wooden braziers, basically ancient roasting pans.
Right.
Inside these braziers were stones that had been superheated, alongside the concentrated residue of cannabis plants. And chemical analysis showed these plants were specifically bred or selected for unusually high THC content.
So they were carefully selecting the most potent strains specifically for a ritual burial, which perfectly solves the famous Herodotus problem.
Yes, I love this part.
Back in the 5th century BC, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about the Scythians, this group of nomadic warriors from the Eurasian steppe. He claimed they took these intense vapor baths. His writings describe them setting up small enclosed tents, heating up glowing stones, throwing hemp seeds on them, and sitting inside the smoke until they were, in his words, howling with pleasure.
And for centuries, modern historians read those texts and just dismissed them. They assumed Herodotus was just exaggerating or entirely misunderstood a bathing ritual he witnessed.
Until archaeologists literally dug up the exact bronze braziers, the heated stones, and the chemical hemp residue in Scythian burial mounds. He wasn't embellishing a single detail.
Not one bit.
And the mechanism makes so much sense when you think about it. Why use hot stones instead of just lighting the plants on fire? Because an open flame destroys a lot of the delicate THC compounds. By using superheated stones in an enclosed tent, they essentially created a massive primitive vaporizer.
Exactly. They were maximizing the psychoactive intake while protecting their lungs from inhaling pure ash.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me. I look at this timeline and I see a giant glaring gap. If they were intentionally burning tobacco in Utah 12,000 years ago, why is the physical cannabis evidence from the Pamir Mountains only from 2,500 years ago? Where is the evidence from the thousands of years in between?
Well, you're hitting on the classic trap of archaeology. We have a deeply skewed perspective of ancient history because of the simple nature of organic decay.
Oh, of course.
Think about dropping a piece of wood in your backyard today. Between the rain, the soil microbes, the insects, it would completely rot away in a decade. Now multiply that by 10,000 years. Stone tools last for millions of years because stone is essentially indestructible. But a hollowed-out wooden tube used as a pipe, a leather pouch filled with dried leaves, that dissolves back into the earth long before an archaeologist ever shows up with a trowel.
Right, that makes total sense.
So that timeline gap isn't a gap in human behavior, it's simply a gap in what materials can survive the elements. As the foundational rule of archaeology states, absence of evidence is absolutely not the evidence of absence.
That reframes everything. We only see the stone, so we falsely assume they only used stone. But clearly, once humanity mastered intentional smoking, once they figured out the plants, the hot stones, the delivery methods, they didn't just treat it like a casual Tuesday afternoon distraction. Because it altered their minds so profoundly, they treated it with intense reverence.
Absolutely.
Specifically as a powerful medicine and as a literal bridge to the divine.
And the historical texts are incredibly unified on this. Long before smoke was ever used recreationally, it was deeply therapeutic. Take the Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt, dating back to roughly 1550 BC.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest and most important medical documents ever discovered. It explicitly details treatments that involve inhaling the smoke from heated herbs, specifically plants like henbane, to treat severe conditions of the throat and lungs.
Treating a respiratory problem by intentionally inhaling thick smoke sounds completely backward to us today. It sounds like a guaranteed way to make a cough worse.
It really does.
But if you break down the biological logic, using the lungs as a direct rapid delivery mechanism into the bloodstream is exactly what modern medicine does. That is the exact mechanism of an asthma inhaler, a nebulizer, or anesthetic gases before surgery. The lungs are incredibly efficient at absorbing chemicals. The delivery methods survived thousands of years. We just eventually ditched the fire.
Right. It was highly rational based on their resources, and the biological mechanisms of the plants often supported the treatment. Henbane, for example, contains scopolamine, which actually relaxes smooth muscle tissue. So inhaling it would genuinely help open restricted airways, even if the smoke itself was harsh.
Wow.
We see this all over the ancient world. The ancient Greeks relied on therapeutic fumigation. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, wrote extensively about inhaling herbal vapors for lung diseases. In ancient India, Ayurvedic medicine, which has roots going back over 3,000 years, developed a highly complex practice called dhumapana.
Which means smoke drinking.
Right. Literally translates to smoke drinking, yes. And it wasn't just throwing leaves on a fire. It involved inhaling specific medicinal herbs through precisely crafted pipes, using detailed, regimented protocols depending on the exact illness.
And beyond physical medicine, it was deeply spiritual, especially when we look at the Americas. Tobacco is strictly native to the Americas. It was completely unknown to Europe, Africa, and Asia until Columbus arrived in 1492. For thousands of years prior to that, indigenous cultures used sacred tobacco for physical healing, for binding vital agreements between tribes, and for communicating directly with the spirit world.
It was foundational.
Yeah, the smoke was viewed as a living carrier. It was a physical manifestation of a messenger that carried prayers up to the divine and brought spiritual visions down to the living.
This brings up the most crucial aspect of ancient smoking: intense discipline. Because smoke was universally recognized as sacred and medicinal, its use was heavily controlled by the community. In a harsh world without antibiotics or modern surgery, if a treatment provided relief even some of the time, it was treated as a monumental tool.
Right, you didn't mess around with it.
Exactly. You treated that tool with immense respect. A shaman inhaling powerful smoke wasn't taking a 15-minute break from foraging. They were enduring a grueling physical ordeal to open a channel between worlds. You didn't just puff on a pipe idly while sitting around.
Right. The concept of tobacco as a casual, everyday, chained habit that you do while waiting for a bus or driving to work is a very recent invention. Which brings us to a really dark, fascinating turn in the history. So what does this all mean? How did humanity go from the highly disciplined Ayurvedic dhumapana and sacred shamanic rituals to the global health crisis of modern casual addiction?
Well, to understand that plunge, we have to look at how smoke was originally used to build human connection and how that exact mechanism was ultimately hijacked.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Evolutionary biology tells us that for early humans, isolation meant death. An individual human cannot fight off a predator alone. Group survived. Therefore, group cohesion was literally a matter of life and death. Anything that enhanced social bonding had immense evolutionary value.
Makes perfect sense.
And modern neuroscience confirms this today. When a group of people undergo a shared, altered experience together, whether that's a shared ritual, rhythmic dancing, or inhaling psychoactive smoke, it actually synchronizes their neural activity.
Yeah.
It triggers the release of bonding hormones like oxytocin. It creates deep, measurable trust.
So the prehistoric smoke circle wasn't just ancient humans goofing off. It was essential social infrastructure.
Yeah.
It was the mechanism you used to build enough deep psychological trust with your group so that you could go out into a dangerous, unforgiving world together, hunt a mammoth, and actually trust that the guy next to you had your back.
That shared trust is the foundation of human civilization. But then we hit the European encounter with tobacco in 1492. When Columbus's crew saw indigenous people inhaling smoke from glowing sticks, they were fascinated. Within weeks, the sailors tried it themselves, and the speed at which the practice mutated is staggering.
Oh, I bet.
Within a few decades, tobacco went from an exotic, sacred curiosity to a massive continental obsession in Europe.
It's like watching a virus spread on Mark. Fast forward. In the 1700s, European aristocracy became obsessed with snuff-powdered tobacco you snort directly into the nose. In the 1800s, cigars were a status symbol everywhere. And then, the 20th century brings the absolute disaster of the industrially manufactured cigarette.
Yeah, what European industrialists essentially did was take a 10,000-year-old, highly disciplined, socially integrated indigenous practice and mutate it into a mass-market consumer product.
They just stripped the soul right out of it.
They stripped away all the ritual and all the discipline. By the 20th century, the tobacco industry was spending billions of dollars to suppress scientific evidence that their product caused terminal cancer. They aggressively marketed to children, and most damningly, they intentionally added chemical compounds like ammonia to the tobacco.
Wait, ammonia?
Yeah, ammonia changes the pH of the smoke, which makes the nicotine hit the brain faster and leave the system quicker, specifically designed to maximize physical addiction and force the consumer to buy more.
That is just, wow. When you step back and look at the whole timeline, the contrast is staggering. The gap between a shaman in 500 BC carefully placing high THC cannabis on hot stones in a communal burial ritual to guide a soul and bond a grieving tribe, and a 1960s tobacco executive sitting in a boardroom genetically engineering and chemically treating a plant specifically to hook teenagers for profit. That has to be one of the widest moral chasms in human history.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really is a profound tragedy of intent. The plant remained exactly the same. The biology and the endocannabinoid receptors of the human body remained exactly the same. But the intent of the user changed entirely.
Right.
Smoke went from being the ultimate revered tool for human connection, spirituality, and healing to a weaponized tool optimized for physical destruction and financial extraction.
It's a heavy realization. We've gone on quite an epic journey today. We started with Homo erectus accidentally getting a contact high while trying not to freeze in a South African cave a million years ago.
Wow.
We looked at Siberian reindeer, filtering mushrooms for their herd, Scythian nomads howling in vapor tents, and traced it all the way down to the engineered tragedy of modern corporate tobacco.
And this isn't just dry history locked in a textbook. It's alive in your biology right now.
Yeah.
The next time you're sitting around a summer bonfire with friends, or you catch the faint scent of wood smoke drifting through the neighborhood on a cold autumn night, and you feel that sudden, strange sense of comfort and belonging, realize that you are participating in a behavioral loop that goes back 100,000 years. You're doing exactly what humans have always done to feel safe. You're breathing it in.
Which leaves us with a final thought I really want you to chew on today. If Ronald Siegel's fourth drive is real, if the primal drive for intoxication and the need for shared, altered states was actually a primary survival mechanism that built human trust around the campfire, how are we fulfilling that deep biological need today?
That's the real question.
Right. In a modern world where traditional communal smoking is rightly dying out for health reasons, and we find ourselves increasingly isolated behind our individual glowing screens, what has taken the place of the tribal smoke circle? And is its absence part of the reason we feel so profoundly disconnected from each other today?
If the biological lock is still in our brains, we have to ask ourselves what keys we're reaching for now.
Keep digging into the sources, keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.